once we got outside help rolling in there, the outside help was absolutely tremendous. In fact, it almost got to the point that it was overwhelming.
Well, while Hurricane Andrew was happening that Sunday and into Monday, it wasn't a meteorological event. It was a social event. It was, what are we going to do about this? You know, they say that once the hurricane is on top of you, that nobody is putting that last point on their tracking map.
We've seen some issues in Florida along the coast where you know, a hurricane coming is a party time, and so why not have a hurricane party?
One of the things that's very hard to plan for is the impact on your infrastructure. You know, you anticipate a certain amount of storm surge and wind damage and on buildings and that sort of thing. What we hadn't anticipated was the total loss of all street signage, all power poles, all utility poles, traffic lights. I mean, it just totally wiped everything out.
It's annoying. I never heard it, and not only the noise, the colors. It's, if you grab a picture and you hit hell, will be people picture the devil on those clouds. It's a reddish, black blue that it's ugly. It's real ugly.
The weekend before for me was a busy weekend, and I didn't really feel the threat from the storm until I think it was sometime around Saturday afternoon.
We thought this is just another storm that we're sampling that's probably not going to affect the United States.
We could get the satellite data. We were of course getting all the text products that were coming in. We were getting the data from the aircraft that were out there flying. I was actually doing some of the prototype wind analyses that we do now on an operational basis for all the tropical cyclones that are out in the Atlantic and also a lot of the ones in the Pacific.
And sure enough, by the time we got out there, it had reorganized and it was heading due west, and during the whole time of the flight it continued heading west and strengthening, and all of us on the plane were very concerned for our family and friends back in Miami.
My concern and here at the district was where was that storm going, what was its wind speeds, what was it going to be when it got here, where was it going to make land impact, and what was it we were going to have to deal with after that storm in a recovery period.
I came in that Friday afternoon, that would have been the 21st. And the forecast was still for the storm to move to our north, but the forecast was for it to intensify and potentially affect some part of Florida. But it was for it to move fairly slowly. But I looked at some of the weather maps that Friday afternoon, and I noticed that they were indicating that the high pressure to the north was going to strengthen. And if it strengthened, the storm was going to speed up, and also the environment would get very, very favorable.
Hurricane Andrew was approaching on that Friday. I was the chief for emergency medical services, so I didn't have responsibilities for the entire county, just for a very, very narrow focus in terms of paramedic response. But I just did normal family things. We got our house ready, but we were assuming that the storm was going to miss us.
Doing some last minute things trying to get ready, but we didn't put any major effort. I think we thought that it was going to pass us by.
We were just listening to what was going on national TV and local TV, trying to see if the storm in fact was heading this way or not.
I went on the air that Friday afternoon and said that the situation has developed that, in my opinion, the risk is sufficient that we need to start thinking about taking action to prepare ourselves.
We were pretty confident that no matter what was going to happen, Andrew was coming to visit us.
On Saturday, we received a notification from the fire department that we all had to report back and get the county ready. At that time, I surveyed all the things I was responsible for and made what I believe is a fatal error by telling the fire chief we were ready for anything that happened.
I had a family, and my wife was 6 months pregnant at the time, and I told her, if a major storm comes our way, I'm getting you out of here.
I was at a Chamber of Commerce seminar at Ocean Reef Club on North Key Largo with my city councilwoman friend, and the city manager and the assistant was there. And the city manager got word at noontime, and he put the city employees on alert.
We went shopping at Publix, and it was impossible because everybody was just there. And I remember getting a lot of water, to the point where my husband was like laughing at me, you know, and saying, you're overdoing it with the water. And I jokingly said to him, hush, Ron, you know, you're from the Bronx, I'm from the islands. One thing you need in a hurricane is water.
And it wasn't until late Saturday that people in South Florida were warned that a potentially strong storm could come here. And it wasn't until Sunday that panic started to set in among the residents.
So it was a day just like this, August 23rd, the day that we were finally doing the final preparations for Hurricane Andrew. It looked just like this, beautiful sunny day. Never thinking that the storm could bring what it did. Unfortunately, early the next morning is when Hurricane Andrew came.
Sunday morning, I realized that it was real when I heard the trash trucks coming to collect the trash in the neighborhood, because trash trucks never come on Sunday.
I remember the fellow that lived next door making the comment as he watched me hang my shutters. He came over and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, there might be a storm coming. I'm putting these shutters up." And he just kind of laughed and said, "You know, I've lived in Florida all my life, and we've been through these kind of things before. It's not that big a deal."
I was preparing for the hurricane because my job responsibility after a hurricane is to go support restoration, and I was really preparing my home for my leaving, making sure the clothes were clean and lots of food in the house, because I was going to go to work regardless of where the storm hit or how severe the storm hit.
Andrew actually occurred fairly early in the season, in August. That's before the peak of the season, and even 3 days before, we had no clue Andrew was out there, but it was being sheared apart, and it looks like it wasn't going to affect Florida.
Mobilized our employees at the Homestead Field Station, which at that point appeared to be the point of impact, South Dade County. I was here at the district office making last-minute storm preparations and giving instructions to our field units in preparation for storm recovery. I did call my wife and asked her to call all of our friends in Homestead and let them know that they were in harm's way. 14 of those people left Homestead, came to our home up in Stewart, and stayed there with us throughout the storm.
You really couldn't put into words what you saw. And no matter how bad you told people it really did not convey the total message of that total destruction that we saw.
I started to get status reports that morning. And as I started calling throughout Dade County, I got reports from Hialeah, from North Dade, from downtown Miami. And I recall calling our Princeton superintendent at the time and asking him, you know, give me a status report. And his response was, "It's bad." And I said, "Well, can you describe it a little bit more?" He says, "It's really bad." And I said, "I need more than that." He goes, "Every pole is down. It's complete devastation."
Andrew was the first disaster, but we actually had a disaster after the disaster in that we were not ready to manage the people. the people who wanted to come back into the area and the people who wanted to come from out of the area to assist us.
Even for us people who grew up in this community, we couldn't find a way around because the landmarks were destroyed.
There was no communication. The police towers, the fire towers, all of those things were blown over. And so where normally you'd use a cell phone, the cell phone towers were blown over.
It was as close to anarchy as anything that I had certainly ever seen in my life, and anything that's happened in the United States and since the Civil War or something, I think, where you had a complete collapse of government.
Long before the storm actually hit, National Guardsmen were coming into their armories and preparing to help support the activities that we knew would be associated with any kind of an impact of the storm to the coast of Florida.
It was surreal because at my house not a tree was down, and I went to work, and some of the people that I shared lunch with, joked with in the hall and met at the water cooler, their homes were gone. And it was hard to imagine what to say to these people. These are people you work with every day, you play bridge with at lunch, you go to the company picnic with, and it somehow doesn't seem fair that you're talking about raking the leaves off your lawn because the wind blew last night, and they're talking about, where am I going to live? It was a very surreal experience, and to pick up that paper on Tuesday morning and see neighborhoods reduced to matchsticks by a hurricane, something that we never thought could happen, and something that the people who have lived in this state for 40 and 50 years would have told you could not happen. Those people had hurricane parties when hurricanes struck in the 60s and 70s. There was no party after Andrew.
Folks that think they've been through a storm, if they didn't go through Andrew, the ones that got close to the near misses, the worst thing they can do is kid themselves and say, I've been through a hurricane.